Sonic is so cool. I think it goes without saying that Sonic today is almost nothing like Sonic from 1998. I mean, just look at these two. While technology has evolved, allowing for games to tackle wider scopes and visions, I believe the Sonic series has gone in the opposite direction. What started off as a great series gradually lost its footing and forgot what made it special in the first place. Today it's the status quo for the series to make fun of itself and its lack of quality, and this cynical side of the series made its debut in the first Sonic game that took no risks whatsoever, Sonic Colors. This game formed the framework for every Sonic game following up to the present, and every Sonic game before this one took some kind of risk in terms of design. Accelerate at the push of a button, turn into a werewolf, go forward and backward through time, give the funny rat a gun, control 3 characters at once, play as Eggman, but arguably, the biggest risk they ever took just so happened to be with one of the most divisive and controversial titles in the entire series. Put Sonic in 3D. Things are really different this time around, especially if the last game you played was Sonic 3. Like, the first thing that jumps out to you is probably going to be, Sonic talks now. Like, a lot. The second thing's probably going to be the music, because this stuff's no joke. Jun Senoue came in to do the music this time around, just like how Michael Jackson came into that. I just gotta say, this soundtrack is peak. I mean, without a doubt, some of the best music I've ever heard in my life. Probably even better than MJ's work in Sonic 3, honestly. Okay, you know how Michael Jackson's thing was, hee hee? You know, if it was ha ha, I probably think people would have found out what he did a lot sooner. Putting this guy in 3D must have been hell to figure out. I mean, you gotta translate 2D momentum into a 3D game. Yet one of the biggest problems when it came to making this game was the level design itself. Sonic moves way quicker than most video game characters, and as such, he'll move through a level way faster. That's a lot of level that he's gonna cover in a short span of time. Imagine modeling the perfect area of a level, but knowing that it's going to get passed by in a fraction of a second. Barely even acknowledged. That's gotta be super discouraging. Before stages were even designed, you'd have to have some kind of narrative to pull it all together and make sense, cutscenes, voice work. You can't rely on little sprite animations anymore. They'd laugh at you if you did that. It can't be about Eggman wanting to turn the world into robot. It's gotta be about him threatening George Bush and committing domestic terror. This doesn't even begin to account for all the extra shit they just threw in to be cute. Like these hub worlds, NPCs with changing dialogue depending on what's happened around them. A whole pet simulator with racing minigames and in-game currency stores. How long did it even take to make this thing? Well, to compare with the game that everyone compared it to back then, Mario 64 took about 3 years of development time to fully finish, while Sonic Adventure started and finished development in 9 months. While Sonic Adventure started and finished development in 10 months. People give this game a lot of crap, but you know what? How about you do better? What can you do in 10 months? Oh, you can lose $4,000 and make your mom cry? Matthew? It's obvious that corners had to be cut due to the short development time, but of what they chose to cheap out on, it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, Sonic's condition flares up when he has to talk, and the characters move like they have problems. Not to mention, some of the dialogue can kind of sound stilted as a result of the cast being given almost no coaching or context for what they're saying. You can make the plot kind of hard to get invested in because characters will just talk to you in Times New Roman the whole time.
If I'm to continue, I need to change this ship back to its original shape.
Speaking of the plot, so this game's approach to story is very comparable to a Quentin Tarantino movie. It's basically Pulp Fiction. It's non-linear, heavy themes of crime, graphic violence, Big the Cat's there. Your opinion of the story is largely dependent on how you play and what order you see the cutscenes. In one character's story, you could be trying to fish for a frog at a water park, and in the other, you're trying to stop someone from manually detonating a missile that didn't go off when they fired it at City Hall. Then go back to fishing. I know this sounds like tonal whiplash, but I think that's kind of the point. Not everything in life is going to be about kicking ass and yelling at people. There's going to be parts that are like, go to the store, get a Gatorade. And I know people shit on Big the Cat and go about, oh, he shouldn't have been in the game. But you have to think about it in the big picture. Like, yeah, he has nothing to do with the majority of the plot, but who says he has to? You have all these characters trying to stop the end of the world, and then you have this one guy who doesn't give a shit. He doesn't know what a Chaos Emerald is. He doesn't know what an Eggman is. And he doesn't want to. He wants to be with his buddy. He's just comfortably ignorant to the entire plot happening around him. He just doesn't care. And that's fine. He's not driven by wanting to be a hero. He doesn't want to save the day. The human race means absolute dick to him. He wants to fish. And that's cool. They changed the characters in huge ways from the games in the 90s. The most you could expect from Sonic when it comes to characterization was a finger wag and the occasional low-quality voice clip.
I'm out of here.
They took every one of these guys' personalities and turned up the dials to like 11. Sonic used to be cool, so now he's bitching. Tails used to be a loyal sidekick, and now he's completely lost without Sonic and needs him to take him to soccer practice. Knuckles used to be gullible, and now he's a knuckle-scraping idiot who believes everything. Eggman went from the hottest man in animation
Get a load of this!
to the magnum opus of male sexuality. He can stick his egg peen in the drywall of his apartment and impregnate everyone on the other side, especially the fellas. Trust me, this guy's a badass. He listens to techno. Amy can vote now. They made Sonic take a shower with Tails. I mean, I get it. It happens to everybody. You get bored, you try new things. You know, you're like in the bathtub, getting a little curious, and all of a sudden, you find your prostate. Hey, you want to scare Sega? Okay, up until recently, this was a very big issue when it came to most Sonic games. The last Sonic game that had a controllable camera, besides Sonic Frontiers, was Sonic Unleashed, back in 2008. So from 2008 onward, you get nothing. The camera will go where it wants and you can suck it up and play. I can understand why many would argue a fixed camera is better for a game like this. Minimizes motion, keeps everything in front of you. But the problem is just that, it's too safe. It puts everything in front of you, and it makes it so obvious where you're supposed to go and what you're supposed to do. Let me put it like this. Would you rather spend most of your days walking through a hallway or through rooms? What I mean by that is, yes, a hallway gets you places, but that's it. You get forward and back. But with a room, you can go left, right, you can turn, you can do whatever the hell you want. More can go wrong with a room because there's more variables at work, but there's only so many times you can walk down a hallway with a new coat of paint before you realize this is Temple Run. And as cool and as rad as Temple Run is, I think for $60, you need something a bit more engaging than a mobile game on your TV. Take a game like Sonic Forces, for example. This is the whole reason the camera works like this too. It's just looking forward, and it looks fine. Just a one-point perspective picture with a bunch of stuff around it. But if you were to turn just 90 degrees, the whole illusion falls apart. The level was not made to be looked at from the side, so it just looks like crap. On the other hand, just being able to move everywhere and look everywhere, there's a uniformity to how complete everything has to be, because it has to be designed to be looked at from every single angle. One of the best examples is Super Smash Bros. I mean, look at the backgrounds for these stages. It looks good, but if you take the camera anywhere except straight on, the whole thing starts to look really strange. These places are 3D, but they function more like 2D pictures that can only be really looked at from far away. This same phenomenon happens, but on a much larger scale for these hallway Sonic levels. I know this is a lot of stuff about the camera, but it really does matter in the big picture. It can take a game from being playable to being immersive. The amount of detail they put into this thing is crazy, even when you don't expect it. Like when you walk into Eggman's quarters, you see a whole bunch of stuff they just put in for the sake of detail. Like he's even got like a funny bridge and an altar where he can pray to his DVDs of problematic Warner Bros. Cartoons. You know in those old Looney Tunes that were like on Boomerang, and there was that one in the South that was, there was the guy with the shotgun and he was drawn really... I don't think they would put that one on the DVD now. And look, there's an Easter egg that if you play the game on, I don't want to say it, but it's like, it's in September, and you go here, there's no NPCs, and that's like a reference to, well, like you go upstairs and you see a secret character. Alright, you ready for this? It's Sonic's dad. Can I just say I hate the whole, you know, people don't like it, but at least I had fun making it. That's like admitting defeat. It's the most coping self-hug I've ever heard. People like Star Wars because it's a good movie. They don't care that George Lucas was tap dancing about it, having a blast on set. They don't care. At least you had fun making your game. You can have fun with your friends. The only difference is one costs a day, the other one costs like 3 years. Do you think the people making Sonic Adventure had fun? I mean, they got to go to Central America for research and gather photos for the game. That's not really making the game. The part where they had to sit their ass down and program 3D momentum and physics on their Windows 95 workstations, that sounds bad. Like, that sounds like real poop. It bums me out. And don't give me the whole, oh, maybe it was fun. Come on. Would you wake up every day, go to work, and the only thing you have to look forward to is, I get to find the one tangent between two vectors. What's that? The game's gonna run at 30 FPS, but all my code's for 60 FPS. Then you get to go to bed for 20 minutes and do it all again. I mean, can you imagine your life is just wake up, program the funny blue rat, and go to bed? That's miserable. In many interviews with Sonic Team developers and producers, they say the hardest game they worked on was Sonic Adventure. And it shows. There's a humanity to this game. They didn't have everything figured out. It wasn't really down to a science, and they really had to think everything through. Yeah, Mario 64 was out, but these games are just night and day. The Sonic games we get today are nothing like the games from the early 2000s. I remember the first game that really jumped out to me in that regards was Sonic Colors. I got it for Christmas, and as soon as I started playing, the one thing that went through my head were the clips of Sonic's voice.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
That is not Sonic. And I was right, it's a new guy, Roger Craig Smith. And no hate to the guy, but there's an obvious difference between this
Copyright law
and this.
Hey there, Bolt Brain! You better give Amy to me or I'll squash ya!
Why is his voice so low? He's not 40. Wait a minute. Yeah, see? All I'm saying is, Sonic's been sounding an awful lot like, oh, Eggman's robot chili dog, Raffle barbecue. But he should be more like, I don't know if that'll make sense. You know, if they got like Happy Madison cast, like to be the new voices of Sonic and Friends, that'd kick ass. Like Adam Sandler's Sonic and David Spade's Tails, Kevin James Robotnik and Deuce Bigelow's Motobug.
Hey, look, it's Dr. Robotnik over there. Hey, it's Robotnik. It's Eggman. Yo.
And Tails is like, if that's Robotnik, I'm out of here. And then Kevin James comes in, he's like,
Oh, it's time to make a robot.
I don't know how Kevin James sounds. And the Motobug's like,
Hey, everybody, it's me, Motobug.
That sucks. Mario 64 came out 2 years before this game. And as influential as that game was, I don't think the controls are the best. And no one would expect them to be perfect. It's the first of its kind. They are perfectly serviceable, and the game is fun start to finish. I will say that, in my opinion, Sonic Adventure has better controls. And I'm going to do my best to delineate why. Mario's initial speed is kind of slow, but the longer you keep a direction, the higher your acceleration gets. However, it just doesn't keep getting higher. There's a max speed that you can reach and you won't be able to go any faster. And if you let go of that direction, you'll have to start back at the slow speed. The same goes for Sonic's controls, but it takes much longer to reach max speed. And that being said, max speed is much higher. Being able to change direction is just as important as maintaining a direction. In Mario 64, your turn radius changes depending on how fast or slow you're going. So if you're standing still or going slow, your turn radius is going to be super small. Your direction can change really snappy. But if you're going fast and you try to turn, it's going to take longer. To compare that with Sonic Adventure, your turn radius is always small, giving you a really great degree of control, but the trade-off is the heightened sensitivity makes it harder for new players to control. The last aspect I really want to go over is how they feel when jumping. Now, Mario's jump height largely depends on what jump you're on. If you're running and you do a jump, then you'll do a moderate distance. If you press jump as soon as you land, then you'll jump higher, and if you jump as soon as you land that one, you'll jump super high. The only way you can affect how high you go is how long you hold the jump button down. Now, if you tap it, you'll just do a little hop, and if you hold it, then you're going to be in the air longer. Now once you jump though, you don't have a whole ton of control to readjust your trajectory. If you try to move while you're in the air, it's pretty slow. Sonic doesn't have a low, medium, and high jump. Instead, the jump height is entirely dependent on how long you hold the button down. But in addition to that, the longer you hold the button down, it seems like your gravity is affected, allowing you to move through the air with a whole bunch more control. Now this makes precise platforming nearly perfect, because you're given so much more wiggle room to readjust your trajectory while falling. One thing that both games share is that their cameras aren't perfect. They both switch between player-controlled, predetermined angles, and then tracks. I know this was to make the view of everything more dynamic, but the trade-off is that sometimes the player gets disoriented, especially if the people are playing for the first time. Granted, this is more of a problem in Sonic Adventure because high speed mixed with a camera you don't fully control can lead to moments you're lining yourself up with a jump, camera shifts to a completely new area, and your flow gets thrown off. A big reason for this is because in both games, forward is entirely dependent on which way the camera is facing. So you can press forward here, but then the camera automatically changes here. You're going to start going that way instead. However, in later releases of the game, the developers added a free cam that removes all of the automation and predetermined camera angles from messing with you. The only problem is you have to keep toggling it back on every single time you load somewhere new. I'm not talking about just a new hub world or a new level. I'm talking about every single room you leave and enter. It goes back to auto cam. Could you guys not program a way for it to remember? Like at least for how long the game is turned on? I mean, I can't be too harsh. They made Red Mountain. People go crazy for Speed Highway, and yeah, I see its appeal. It just doesn't really offer much in terms of replayability. One stage that's oftentimes brought up is Twinkle Park. This stage is different from the others because it constantly wraps upward on itself, so if you fall down, you go back to where you used to be. Very similar to upper and lower paths in the original Sonic trilogy. Plus, with all the great opportunities for skips, it offers a great challenge for both first-timers and those returning. But Red Mountain, this stage is perfect. It is God's gift to Earth. Shigeru Miyamoto would throw his hands up in the air like, "Hey, got me." Without joking, this level exemplifies everything that can go right with a Sonic level going right. Firstly, the amount of shortcuts you can pull off in this stage is incredible. And a lot of them aren't that hard to pull off. You just have to be comfortable enough with the controls. Some being intentionally added while others not. This level tests how good you are at the game. And worst case scenario, if you're not super well versed with the controls, you still get a really fun level. But if you know how this game works, just even a little bit, you can pull off stuff like this. This makes me smile. With some of the other stuff you can pull off being as crazy as it is, it makes me wonder how much of this was really an oversight, and how much of this was intentionally designed this way. This game's controls are complex, but not in the way that they're complicated to get a hold of. But instead, it's in the way that they add depth to second gameplay. Anyone can pick up a controller and play as any of these characters and have a good time start to finish, without even brushing the surface of what they can do. Case in point for Mario 64, the backwards long jump. 9.5 people out of 10 aren't going to be doing this in their playthrough. But it's still able to be done. Not only can it be done, but it rewards you. As for gameplay depth, let's take Sonic's jump for instance. You can play most of the game thinking your jump is only good for doing this. But when you find out the longer you hold the button down, the slower you descend, suddenly new possibilities open up, and you think of these shortcuts you could have taken. The reason that gameplay depth is important is because it allows you to not only get better at completing an objective, but get better at how you move in general. The way I test to see how much depth game controls have is by looking at a normal run, and then a speed run side by side and look for differences. This is a very scientific, I'm a scientist by the way. I take Sonic classes in college. I drive a cool blue car, and it's fast. Take Sonic Colors for example. Here is a standard playthrough. Now here's someone playing it as fast as they can. Now my calculations show that these are kinda similar. Even though their intentions are very different, the results are largely the same. No matter how good you get at this game, you won't be able to cut that many corners. But when talking about gameplay depth, cutting corners is basically a necessity. Being able to skip sections of a level based on how good you are is an inherently great concept. It's an instant litmus test that shows how good you are at the game and rewards you accordingly. Compare what you saw in Sonic Colors side by side to this level in Sonic Adventure. Here's a standard playthrough. Now here's a speedrun. I can't even begin to comprehend how much this takes to pull off, but the fact that he did it and was able to do it is more important. If he was stuck to go on the same route every single time, it would make it no different than a fancy hallway. Hence, Sonic Colors, Sonic Forces, Sonic and the Secret Ring, Sonic and the Black Knight, etc. Really, games that offer a variety in level completion methods, or paths, are basically non-heard of in the series, apart from, the 2D games. And I get it, it takes a long time to model these stages, make sure they're perfect and everything, and I know that if you stick with one available route, then you can put all of your time and attention into it. And the thought of making other paths that some players are never even going to see is super discouraging and really repelling. But what they forget is that hallways don't have much longevity. You're not going to want to run down a hallway and go whee again and again. Whereas if you have a hallway that splits into another hallway, and then another hallway that splits, and then you reach the end, it's going to feel like you chose to do something and you succeeded, rather than you followed the instructions and you reached the end. Like, hey jackass, you just ran through this whole place like a psycho, but you could have gone that way too. People have been throwing around the word spectacle when it comes to Sonic as if it's a bad thing. What they mean is short little sequences that give levels their own flourish and set piece. And I don't know what the big deal is. I mean, spectacle has been a staple of Sonic's whole thing since the first game. Like, look, if it wasn't for Sonic getting launched up into those rings in Green Hill, my dad would have bought a SNES. It doesn't matter Sonic's gameplay loop is fun as it is. If they didn't show off, people wouldn't be interested. These spectacles may have gotten more automated as the series went on, but they're still an important staple. Another aspect that Sonic Adventure does really well is turning. Startup speed, max speed, stopping, turning, jumping. Okay, I just gotta say it. Sonic looks stupid like this. I mean, like, not in general, but like, ever since 2008, he's had this look, and this is not it. There was a lot of charm that's just gone. And even in like the creepy early 2000s renders, where it was like super sharp teeth and looked aggressive, they had way more character and like personality. I would way prefer a look similar to this, but that's just me. I know this is called Sonic Adventure, but that doesn't mean you're just stuck with him for the whole game. All of the major characters you meet during the gameplay, you get to play as them. And it's not like, oh, you got a point, you unlock Robot. It's a little like that, but they go further. In keeping with the tradition of being the most Quentin Tarantino Sonic game, you can't understand the full picture just viewing the game from Sonic's perspective. That's why you get 5 additional viewpoints that converge and diverge and have all kinds of things going on that you couldn't have any idea about if you're just playing as Sonic. The Sonic team wants you to play as them. You spent like $60 on this game. Play the damn robot. But how it goes is like, you're playing as Sonic. You're thinking, I'm so fast, look at me. And you see Tails, and you go over and he's like, oh wow, he's coming dangerously close to making a joke that would have been censored if it came out 2 years later. I'm not gonna say it. You get there, and it's like, hey buddy, the fuck was that? And then Tails is like, look, I found a rock. And you're going like, what is with this guy? And then boom, you can play as Tails. Or keep going. And if you do, it's like, hey Knuckles, what's up? And he does his best impression of a football player being home with his wife. So you kick his ass, and the aptly titled This Asshole theme song starts playing. Eggman comes in, takes the rocks, puts them in the water, and you fight it. The Knuckles just lays on you. I got more important stuff I gotta do. And you're thinking, what stuff could be more important than fighting water and a big red egg? All of a sudden, you can play as Knuckles. Or go on. Sonic and Tails fly after Eggman, they get shot down, Sonic can't find Tails. Little does he know Tails is just tripping on peyote in the jungle, he's having a blast. But Sonic doesn't know that. So we're running by the casino and we meet Amy by the local Johnny Depp restaurant. And she says, hey, watch this bird, okay? And Sonic's like, no. And Amy's like, there's this fucking big monkey robot. Looks like a monkey. It wants to cleave this bird's head and knock his block off. And Sonic's like, I don't care. Now you can play as Amy. And then you get to Eggman's flying ship. And he takes the bird and he calls out a robot to shoot you. And then you kick his ass, but Amy stops you and says the robot helped her. And Sonic gets the idea. But wait a minute, why did the robot help her? And then you can play as the robot. And you're starting to feel like, wow, this is Sonic Adventure. But it sounds like the others are having much more of an adventure than he is. All of a sudden, you get to the front of the ship and you see this guy. And you wonder, of all people, how did this guy end up here? He wants to fish for a frog. He doesn't even know where he is.
I have caught my god.
He wants a frog. You can now play as Big. The game tempts you to see all of these guys' stories,
but it always gives you the option to just keep going if that's what you want to do.
Okay, I don't know if I'll get another chance to bring this up, but Eggman's brain goes to 480p right before Sonic's final boss. Like, he starts snoring and gargling and laughing. Like, he's never made this sound ever before in the entire series. He literally sounds like...
I probably come across as super scatterbrained in this video, but I mean, it's hard to get my ideas perfectly organized on games I really enjoy. I mean, I just kind of keep going from topic to topic and aspect to aspect, trying to cover as many important things as I can remember. I could go on and on about the Game Gear games that you can have as unlockables in the 2003 version, and never even touch upon the fact that Gamma can jump. This game just holds a really special place in my heart. Some days I'll wholeheartedly say it's my favorite game ever made. Other days I'll say it's Super Mario Bros. 2, Luigi's Mansion, Super Mario Galaxy 1, but regardless, even if it's not my favorite game of all time, it will always be in my top picks. And all in all, it doesn't really need to be a perfect game to be the best game.
And yeah, this whole video is just my opinion. I don't mean to come across like some pseudo-intellectual, like, this is right and that's wrong. It's all relative, just like, you know, comedy. Norm Macdonald could go up on well, not anymore, but he could have gone up on stage and give the most thigh-slapping funny joke of all time. But there's always going to be people that laugh, and there's going to be people that don't. And that's fine. Like, hey, why did the man go to McDonald's? To get a large hamburger and large french fries. Funny joke, right? Well, now replace burger with Twin Towers. Not so funny now, is it?
It's the imperfections in something that remind you that a person made it. You can tell an AI to generate a perfect picture of a bridge, and yeah, it'll probably look spotless. But there's more to be found in someone who makes a bridge their own way. There's 1,000,001 ways this game could have turned out, and I'm glad it turned out the way it did.